3 times, the world almost ended. Welcome to Your Dose of Wowness.
On January 25th, a team of Norwegian and American scientists launched a 4-stage sounding rocket from an island off the coast of Norway. They were sending equipment up into the high altitude of the Barents Sea to observe the aurora borealis. But almost immediately after the rocket cleared the launch pad, an alert flashed thousands of miles away in Moscow. The Russian military's early warning system had detected the launch, and the threat level escalated so fast that the Chaget, the Russian nuclear command briefcase, was activated and physically open on the president's desk. A weather rocket lifts off the coast of Norway to study the northern lights. Minutes later, the president of Russia has the nuclear briefcase open on the table in front of him. In January 1995, years after the Cold War was supposed to be over, a head of state reached the most recent confirmed point in history where a nuclear response was actively considered. What makes this moment so unnerving is the total absence of malice. There were no blockades, no ultimatums, and no aggressive troop movements. The world arrived at the threshold of a nuclear exchange because of a completely routine, peaceful science experiment. By 1995, the Soviet Union had been dissolved for over 3 years. Under President Boris Yeltsin, Russia had entered a period of warmer diplomatic relations with the United States and its allies. The constant heavy dread of the Cold War had largely lifted from public consciousness. Yet that diplomatic thaw didn't dismantle the hardware. Both Russia and the United States kept their early warning radar networks, their command protocols, and their hair-trigger response postures fully armed and intact. The geopolitical mood had changed, but the machinery of mutually assured destruction was still quietly running in the background. That machinery was waiting when researchers fired the Black Brant 12 from the Andoya rocket range. This was a standard 4-stage sounding rocket on a purely scientific flight path, carrying only atmospheric instruments. This was a real, peaceful science mission, properly announced, fully legal, and it still nearly triggered a nuclear response. The researchers knew a rocket launch in that region could look suspicious, so, fully adhering to international norms, Norway sent advance diplomatic notification to Russian authorities well before the countdown. They shared the launch window, the location, and the peaceful nature of the project to ensure no one was caught off guard. The system, designed to prevent misunderstandings, functioned flawlessly on the Norwegian side. The paperwork was filed, the correct diplomatic channels were used, and the warning was officially sent. They had every reason to believe the airspace was safe. But on January 25th, the Russian early warning radar personnel tracking the skies over the Barents Sea had absolutely no idea the scientists were there. This side-by-side comparison shows exactly what the radar operators were seeing. The Black Brant 12 had a specific ascent speed and a multi-stage separation pattern that happened to perfectly mimic the signature of an American Trident submarine-launched ballistic missile. The match was no coincidence. Russian military planners were highly trained to watch for a specific decapitation strike scenario, where a single Trident missile would be launched to detonate a high-altitude nuclear device, unleashing an electromagnetic pulse to blind Russian defensive radars right before a larger barrage. Because Tridents could be fired from a submerged submarine lurking silently off the Norwegian coast, the sudden appearance of a fast-moving, multi-stage object ascending over the Barents Sea fit the worst-case scenario exactly. The radar operators were not looking at a glitching computer or a faulty satellite sensor. The data on their screens was entirely accurate. The rocket was really there, flying exactly how a nuclear strike weapon would fly. Norway told Russia this launch was happening, in advance, through the proper channels. The warning just never made it to the one desk that needed it. The notification was successfully transmitted into the Russian government apparatus, but it was swallowed by internal bureaucracy. A chain of administrative miscommunication meant the alert never trickled down to the actual military personnel monitoring the early warning radars in real time. We're closing out this Cold War stretch on the most recent entry in the whole arc, and honestly, the fact that this happened in 1995 unsettles me more than some of the older stories. Subscribe for the finale of this arc, and tell me in the comments, did you know this one happened this recently? With no diplomatic memo to explain the launch, the radar crew treated it as a live threat. The alert rapidly bypassed standard delays, shooting straight up the chain of command until the military contacted President Boris Yeltsin. For the first time on record, the Chaget was brought to the Russian president and fully activated in response to a live warning. Yeltsin sat with his senior military officials and the open nuclear football, preparing to authorize a retaliatory strike. Some accounts put the actual decision window at somewhere around 3 minutes. A head of state was forced to sit at a table, watch the clock tick down, and consider ending modern civilization entirely because an administrative clerk somewhere in the government failed to forward a piece of paper. On this radar map, you can see the agonizing reality of those final seconds. Russian officials scrutinized the object's telemetry. The only way to know for sure if this was a decapitation strike was to see if the stages continued upward or if the projectile banked toward Moscow to detonate an EMP. As they watched, the trajectory held steady, carrying the object further north. It was heading away from Russian territory, over the Barents Sea. The system built specifically to prevent this exact scenario existed, worked as designed on one end, and still failed anyway. In earlier near misses, the triggers were very often technological, a malfunctioning computer chip or a satellite misreading sunlight off clouds. You can engineer better sensors to fix those. But this was born from a bureaucratic gap. You cannot patch human administration the way you can patch software. The cold reality is that the systems capable of producing a nuclear crisis did not vanish when the Soviet Union fell. The same silent administrative vulnerabilities that nearly triggered a launch in 1995 remain fully intact today. A notification that should have arrived and didn't. That's the whole story, and it happened well within a lot of our lifetimes. That closes out the nuclear near misses in this arc. For the finale, we're leaving human decisions behind entirely and looking straight up at the largest solar storm ever recorded and how close it came to happening again in our own lifetime. That's day 120, the Carrington